Welcome to this press conference for the opening night film of LFF, the gala film that is presented in association with American Express, and that is A United Kingdom. It's a film that's both thematically and visually very ambitious. It manages to be both very politically acute and at the same time intimate and deeply romantic. Can I remind you all to switch off your mobile phones or at least put them on silent as I welcome to the stage actors Laura Carmichael and Tom Felton. As Saretse Karma, David Oyelowo, who's also producer. Director Amma Asante. Lead actress Rosamund Pike. And Jack Davenport and Jessica Oyelowo. Well, welcome to you all and congratulations on a magnificent film. David, if I can start with you, because this project does start with you indeed. And it wasn't, I mean, it was something you'd had in mind for quite a while. It wasn't an easy project to get off the ground.
No, morning everyone. It wasn't an easy project to get off the ground, but the way it happened is in 2010, I was doing a film called 96 Minutes in Atlanta. The producers of that film, Justin Moore-Louis and Charlie Mason, had optioned a book by Susan Williams called Color Bar, and it was basically about the relationship between Saretse Karma and Ruth Williams, and it was the image of them on the cover of the book that arrested me. This young man in a trilby and trench coat and this beautiful woman next to him. I read the book and it became an obsession with which I dragged anyone and everyone I loved working with and who I felt was talented and would share my passion, and that basically constitutes a lot of the people who ended up helping make the film.
Amma, your last film, Belle, had a very romantic story in the foreground and sort of politics in the background. Here, it's an extremely complex mix of the two, and indeed, you know, the sort of the panorama of the landscape and the very intimate domestic interiors. I mean, how do you set about balancing those?
It was very difficult. I mean, it was a constant balance right the way through development, through shooting the film, and of course, in the edit, we were balancing those two things right the way through to the final cut, and it was very, very difficult. And even once you finished, you can't help asking yourself the question: is the balance right? I think it is, but for me, love story allows you to bring the intimacy to the story, and the backdrop for me should always be political in some way, or big world in some way, universal in some way, in a big world way, and that's what both Belle and A United Kingdom, I think, bring in many ways. So it was very important for me that the balance was right on both.
Rosamund, it's almost impossible to resist the sheer personality of Ruth. I mean, she's wonderful. That I mean, what was it that struck you first of all? Presumably, when you read the script rather than the biography.
Yeah, I mean, Ruth is, I'm glad you say that. I find her spirit so gorgeous somehow. And David wrote to me, and he first sent me these photos that were taken by a very good photographer, Margaret White, who did some photographs of Ruth and Saretse when they had begun and undertaken their life in Botswana together. And there were these close-ups of these faces, and I opened those photos before I looked at the script, and I was moved to tears by them in a sort of immediate, strange way that I don't quite understand even now. But I think it was that somehow you saw the love, and you somehow underneath that saw what it had cost them. And I think that was all in those photos. And I then read the script, and I just found, you know, Ruth has tremendous pluck, which is not something, you know, I don't think that's a word we even use these days. You know, it's a kind of, it feels very dated, but it's such a wonderful quality. And it was the way she just went for it with a sort of heartfelt yes, saying yes to life, it seemed like. And, you know, in these days of dithering and moments of indecision, the certainty with which she undertook her love and commitment to her marriage, I found it inspiring.
Jack and Jessica, done the end. Hi. As the Cannings, I mean, you could be, if you like, the pantomime villains. But I mean, what
if you like.
If you like. but at the same time, I think underneath both of them, you see a kind of uncertainty that they can tell things are changing, and they really don't quite know how to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, when I first read the script, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a danger that, the people who embody empire could be a bit moustache twirling. Well, not obviously in your case, but hopefully, but we gave it a good go. But because the story's true, I personally had no sort of qualms about having a go at this character, because there's actually something rather delicious about watching. This is not, a wildly approximate version of how the empire behaved towards Suretse and Ruth. It was appalling, and I hope you do notice that both of our characters at times are a little unsure about. Because you're right, they do sense that the change is in the air, but at the same time, they're operating with a manual that is becoming increasingly out of date. If this was a fictional story, I think, it would be, there's a danger that this side of the story would look perhaps unbelievable, but then at the same time, it's one of those situations where like, that no one made this up. This actually happened. So, yes, hopefully it wasn't too pantomimey, but I do wear a white linen suit in the middle of Africa, so that's faintly ridiculous.
But I think
and a big hat.
It's the employment of kind of etiquette and manners, isn't it, perhaps, Jessica? That's the thing that is so powerful in that old establishment.
Yes, there's the thing with these people is, as Jack said, they're absolutely real, and they fully believed what they believed in. And they believed in etiquette, and they believed in certain standards. However off their standards may be, they believed in them. So if you want to keep away from pantomime, you have to put yourself in their shoes and see that their world is crumbling and what that means to them. And do your best as an actor to embody somebody else's belief system, however far away it is from your own. I've known about this story for a very long time as well. David's my husband. This is a story very close to our hearts. So to be able to play the person that's trying to pull these two apart was a challenge, but Lady Canning, believed what she believed. So you just have to put yourself in their shoes and see that it was real and true for these people, that their whole life was threatened by the love that Ruth and Suretse had.
Tom, you're no stranger to playing perfidious insofar as...
I'm not sure if I know what that means, but I'll take it.
Well, in this context, I mean, Draco Malfoy to Lancaster is a bit of a jump. But on the other hand, this is the guy who, again, is having to sort of shift and is always, although he represents a very powerful kind of empire, is actually often a bit behind the curve, isn't he?
Yes. To sort of continue really on what Jack was saying, I don't see these individuals as villains at all, really. They're just sort of byproducts of what the system entails at the time. Granted, they're not the nicest of people, possibly, but really it's fear that they're working out of, and they're terrified that the status quo and the generations of hard work from their ancestors is going to go to waste, really, and the world will turn on its head. And Amma has a wonderful ability to do that. I was lucky enough to work on her last project as a somewhat villainous chap as well. But I found them very human in a weird way, and I find it quite easy to sort of empathise with their position, despite it not really aligning with today's standards. To me, it shows a great way of how the shift happened almost overnight, and Suretse and Ruth's story was really one of the greatest events to do that in this realm, I think.
Laura, as Ruth's sister, I mean, Ruth's sister is also a great character because of the support that she gives. But I suppose, I mean, you again have played a lot of period dramas and looked at the kind of social customs and things of the day. Were there things that surprised you about this period, the sort of late 40s period, about what was permissible and what wasn't?
Well, I mean, I was talking to my friend about it earlier today, actually, that there's something about these women that reminds me of my grandmother. I think that women who lived through the war have this sort of bravery that surprised their parents, and that's what you see with Ruth and her ability to just to love and to think of what might befall later. And for Muriel, she's a bit more nervous and a bit more straight-laced, but she adores her sister and she adores Seretse, and despite her concerns, wants the best for her sister, and so goes through that with her, I think.
Okay, well, time to invite some questions from the floor. If you could please identify yourselves when you have a question. Who would like to go first? Yes. Okay, sorry, can you just wait for the microphone? Sorry.
Hello. Hi, it's Alistair Harkness from The Scotsman. It's a question for Amma and David, I guess. What was the reaction in Botswana to sort of largely, I guess, British production going over and telling a story that is actually quite important to their national identity as well? How were you embraced? What was it like working over there? And what was it like for, I guess, for the actors as well, playing those characters that are so integral to that country, playing it there with people who presumably remember the story and it was important to them as well?
Well, I think from my point of view, I think it was probably comforting to them that the story was going to be told through the gaze of a woman of colour who looked like them, and so that helped. Everything I got during the research period, pre-production period, and then when we were filming was that this was a story that they knew was a great story, but was an untold story, and a story that most of the world didn't know about today. And so from most of what I got was a kind of relief that the story was going to be told. But of course there was a curiosity about how they would be reflected on screen, how their country would be, how they would be as people. And I think for us it was about telling them why we had chosen first to shoot the film in their country. We very much wanted the DNA of the country running through our film, and that's why it was important for us to do so, and letting them know that that's why we had chosen it. And earning the respect. I think with something like this, it takes time. It's slow. It's not overnight. We were very respectful whenever we went to the villages, when we were scouting and choosing which village we would go to. We had to go through the chiefs of the village. We had to ask permission. Even though we weren't allowed to ask ourselves, we had to have representatives. We still needed to be there so that they could see the whites of our eyes. And so it was showing respect throughout all of the steps that we took constantly. And I can let David pick it up from there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what I found about actually shooting in Botswana is there was a generational divide. I mean, the story that we are highlighting took place about 70 years ago. So the older generation were very cognizant of the story, very delighted that we were shooting it in Botswana. There was a real chance and real pressure to shoot it in South Africa, where there is a better tax break, more of an infrastructure, but we were absolutely insistent about shooting it in Botswana. The current president of Botswana is Ruth and Seretse's son, and so there was support for us shooting there. But one of the things that really struck me is that the younger generation didn't know much about Ruth and Seretse at all. In fact, I remember arriving at the airport with my assistant, who's a black lady herself, and the driver, who was about 30, maybe 35, Botswana gentleman, looked at my assistant and said, "Oh, so will you be playing Ruth?" I was so taken aback by that. But, you know, that their history that they are taught in schools is David Livingstone. It just goes to show that the byproduct of any colonialist, or in this instant it was a protectorate, but still that's the residue of colony, is the history that ends up getting taught because of the allegiance and lost. So it really made it doubly important to not only tell the story there but get it right, because of how even their history had been, as Amma says, lost to them. And I really think it just made us redouble our efforts to do the story justice.
Yeah. I remember one girl on an aeroplane saying to me, "Oh yes, I know about Seretse." She was from Botswana. She was actually from Saruwe, and she said, "He married royalty, didn't he?" And I said, "No. She married royalty."
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Dean Pettifer, and I'm from UK Film Review. My question is for everybody. I was wondering, what lesson did you take from your previous film experience that helped you with this experience in the United Kingdom, and what lesson did you take from your work on United Kingdom that will help you in your future film work?
That is a big question.
For everyone.
In very high temperatures, if you have to wear a huge hat, let someone else carry it till the last moment.
Basically.
That's it.
Anybody else like to tackle that one?
Heat probably has a lot to do with it. I mean, the heat in Botswana was scorching. It was the sort of heat that wins you as you get out of any air conditioning. Your eyes sort of stew in the boiling juices of your eyes, and if you bite into a piece of fruit, it's hot. And it's strange things. And then I've just been filming in the heat again, and thought, I'm prepared for this now.
Actually, very funny to follow that up. I remember Jessica's first day on set in Botswana, and Rosamund had been there for quite a while, and we had all experienced the same thing when we first arrived, this sense of, oh my God, how will I think in this? How will I be creative in this? Probably except for David, who's done it many times before. And you have. And I remember Jessica saying, "Amma, is this it? Is there anything we can have to cool the room down?" And I said, "No, Jessica, this really is it." And I looked across at Rosamund, who was doing a hospital scene in bed at that particular point, who had totally acclimatized and was totally cool with it and was just eating watermelon from the bed. And I was like, she's done it, she's acclimatized, when actually I haven't yet. So it is that sense of, once you've done that heat, and know you can think in that heat and be creative in that heat, that you can obviously, you can do it again. I knew how to do it in the cold, but I just didn't know how to do it in that heat until now, really.
But everything that everyone's saying here is also a reason why, whenever you can, you want to shoot in the place the events took place, because the juxtaposition of that heat, and then when we came to London to shoot the London portion, is a part of the story,
and what the couple experienced themselves,
and what they were gaining and giving up also, and literally we went from those ridiculous temperatures to shooting in London just
-3. I remember
just going into
exactly.
I mean, wow, that was night and day.
It was -3, and I felt like I'd never felt cold like it, even though I'd felt colder. Yeah. But the body had acclimatized to the heat, and it was just a complete shock coming out into that cold. But it's really good to be able to train your brain to still work with those extremes, I think.
Amma wore lots of big hats.
Thank you. I'm a fashionista, for goodness sake.
Sorry, I thought the microphone had got to you.
Hello, I'm Maureen Goffler from Agence France Presse. Last year it was women. This year a big theme of London Film Festival is diversity and how to shine more on black stars. So you are the opening shining black stars. What according to you is necessary, needs to be done to improve diversity in the world cinema today?
Tom?
I'm glad you came to me this week. How long have we got?
Yeah, David.
Okay.
Go on.
Look, I mean, you know, all we're seeing here with the United Kingdom is a reflection of the country we live in. You know, Amma directing this film shouldn't be special. It's special to me artistically, but it shouldn't be special that a woman, you know, if women constitute 50% by and large of the population.
Not a minority.
Not a minority. But here we are still in that place. But my hope is that when people see this film, they will see themselves in both Ruth and Seretse. They will see this country's history. They will see us as people of African descent's history and how that intersects with British history inextricably, and why we are very proud to call ourselves British, and where we're very proud to call ourselves Africans. And with time, it will just become less and less special. We could go into all of the reasons why, you know, diversity remains an issue, but honestly, I think what I'm so proud of in terms of Pathé, a company that has been doing diversity for quite a while. You know, I also did Selma with them. They did Mandela, they did Pride, they did Suffragette last year. That's the difference, is those who are going to do it and those who are going to talk about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that goes for producers also, that's financiers, that's producers, that's wonderful actors like Rosamund and Jack and Jess and Tom and all of the others who have chosen to come and work with us and contribute, bring their weight to this story, the weight of their box office, the weight of their profile, the weight of their importance, to add to David's, to add to whatever I might have, so that audiences want to go and see these films. Because I think it's a multi-pronged, you know, solution that comes from so many different directions. It's audiences, it's producers, it's us as filmmakers taking responsibility for when we know we have a default character that could be something else, could be female, could be of another race or ethnicity, for instance. It's big, but it's simply doing more of what Pathé has chosen to do, simply doing more of what Rick McCullum, our producer, alongside David, have chosen to do, which is tell stories that are relevant to the world and happen to have slightly different characters to the one we've been traditionally used to seeing on screen.
But also, isn't it true that a movie like this, when it's looking for distribution and people start looking at how it might fare, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the moment, isn't it, it's not compared, it's not put in a bracket with other love stories, it's put in a bracket with 12 Years a Slave, with Mandela, with, you know, which bear no resemblance to this as a film.
You are not wrong.
Right, okay, so that's what as I've understood it, and really, you know, the goal would be for this just to be seen in the canon of love stories, really, and the sort of the protagonists or the colour of their skin should be irrelevant, although it's part of the story. But you know, in terms of just genre and how a film like this might fare in the cinema, it should, you know, it should be given parity with films that are more like it in subject matter.
Richard Fitzwilliam's Talk Radio Europe. A question for Amma. The fact that you're a woman director, of course, is a matter of considerable significance. Of course, last year, diversity particularly was promoting women.
Yes.
But it seems to me very good news, even if the statistics still aren't or anything like what we would hope they would be. It does seem to me there are far more women directors directing important movies. Am I correct, just judging what I've seen in recent months?
There are more, but there are not a lot.
No, that's
I think that's the answer in many ways. Somebody gave me the figure for black female directors yesterday during our junket. It had doubled from when I did my TED talk a couple of years ago, where it was under 1%, and now it was about 1.4%. So when we put it into you know, when we talk about that intersection of black female directors, it obviously gets a tiny bit bigger, goes to about 7%, I think, roughly. Don't quote me on that, but somewhere around that. But as David said, we're not a minority. As women, we're not a minority. We're 50% of the population. We also play a large part in getting men to the cinema to watch these films. So, and oftentimes, that's to watch films with white men, you know, between a certain age bracket on the screen. And women, and it's not to say that women directors will always direct women's stories, that's not to say that at all, but seeing the world through a female gaze from time to time shouldn't be an odd thing. It shouldn't be 1.4% of the time or 7% of the time when we are 50% of the population. So I would agree with you, it's definitely getting better, but it's not good.
Okay, next question. Yes. The microphone just coming.
Hi. Oh, is that, yeah. Hi, it's Faria from The Times. It's a question for Amma. You said just a short while ago that it's about telling stories, or you know, sort of diversity, if you will. Is about telling stories with characters that are different to the ones we're used to seeing on screen. I was wondering, what did you mean by that? Could you expand on that? Or
well, I don't think it's... I think we all know that oftentimes when we go to the cinema, the majority of films that are on in the cinema happen to be about men, happen to be about white men, and they happen to be within a particular age bracket. And when we talk about diversity on screen, obviously that's what we're challenging. We're not saying we want to stop those films being made or get rid of them. We're simply saying that there are other realities that are also a default experience. You know, I walk a female path every day. I see the world through these female eyes, and that's my default experience. And I know, as I've just said, that there are 50% of other human beings in this country who walk a similar path to that. So it's not about removing what's already there, it's about allowing the space for others to join and have the same privilege.
Okay, yes, at the back.
It's Melissa from Red Carpet News TV. My question's for Rosamund and David. Obviously, this is a really powerful film, and you guys share some like really emotional scenes, but also you managed to keep it quite light-hearted. You've got this nice light-hearted atmosphere between you two. How was that like balancing that on set to maintain that atmosphere?
That's really a question for Amma, isn't it?
Okay, all three of you.
It's a dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something you can't really legislate for, how well you'll get on, especially in playing a husband and wife. I've got to be so careful. My wife's at the other end of the...
She's got the glare.
But, you know, it began for me at Rosamund's reaction to the photographs I sent her.
That wasn't very light-hearted, though, was it?
No, but it was the beginning of knowing that we were on the same page about how we felt about these individuals, our passion for them, our respect for them, our desire to see their story told well and truthfully. And I think that that is what enabled us to go for the emotional moment and go for the lightheartedness, because we so respected the love that they shared. It wasn't about being portentous or sanctimonious about it. It was about a celebration of these two people that we really admired. And I think that, for me anyway, that's where it flowed from, you know, and you know, being married to the lovely Jessica, you know, I know what that relationship is as well, and that, you know, she and I have been married for 18 years, and we have 4 wonderful children, and you know, being in love is the most exhilarating feeling. It genuinely is, and that was what also drew me to this story. I wanted to see that. We so rarely see love on screen. We see lust, but this was an opportunity to really celebrate unashamedly how romantic and wonderful and powerful love is. And that, of course, is to do with laughter and chemistry and joy.
That's a 3-dimensional life. We know that even when we're going through the worst of times, and hopefully if a relationship is real, you have to be able to laugh together through those times. And if you're really approaching this couple as a, you know, 3-dimensional real pair of human beings, then laughter must be a part of the journey.
And we did share a real love of music. That was the first thing that they really were attracted to each other over, was this love of jazz and love of dancing and this kind of spirit of life that, you know, was part of their courtship. You know, I don't think they realised it would end in marriage at that point. And there's that scene which I love when we arrive in Palape, and Ruth is very taken aback to see that the hotel where they're going to spend the night has whites only at the door and on the door, and Seretse makes a joke about, you know, there being special dispensation for kings, even black ones, and then when they're in this hotel room, which sort of there's a sadness to it because they hear music from the bar, and they could be so easily enjoying that music, and then they just start dancing in the hotel room together. And that was kind of, I don't know if that was in the script or if we just did that. I can't remember.
It was added later.
But,
yeah.
But it was fun. All those moments that you can convert something quite serious into something to laugh about is, you know, I think we were trying to seek those out anyway.
Also, if I could just add, as the representative in the film of trying to stomp all over any light moments, when I was doing the press kit for this, when we were making the film, I wasn't being facetious, but just to follow on from what David said about the representations one sees in movies, not so much of love, but of lust, essentially. You know, I think as audiences, we actually get quite tired of the sort of trope of like love conquers all, doesn't it? And to the point where you're kind of like, well, does it? Does it really? And here's the thing, yeah, it does, because they did, and this incredible, against all odds, deep love between two people helped topple an entire empire. And it really happened. And in that context, it's sort of, I do think the kind of, you know, the broader emotional themes of the film say a lot more than, you know, a lot of the movies we get to see in a given year. So there you go.
This is probably have to be the last question, yes.
Thank you. Sarah from Aesthetica magazine. Further to Jack's point there, I just wanted to ask you, Amma, there is so much historic depth and political depth to the film as well, especially with the question of sort of natural resources and so forth coming in at the end, which we knew was a way that a lot of neoliberal policies returned to Africa. Where, as a director, did you decide to pull back from giving too much information, too much emphasis on the politics and returning to the love story, and vice versa? How did you decide where to bring in this context?
Well,
to help us?
when David first called me up at home and interrupted me from packing my things because I was moving.
You thank me now.
Yeah, thank you, darling. Look at me now. And the first thing he sent me actually was the photo essay that we then later sent to Rosamund of the real couple, the images that you see at the end of the film and more. And then eventually the script and Susan Williams's incredible book, Colour Bar. And the first thing I said to him when I called back is, yes, I've read the script. Can I give you a call at the end of the week because I'm moving? And he said, no, do it now. Give me your notes now. And one of my biggest thoughts was that, you know, nothing in this story should come without it passing through the prism of the couple's love. So, for instance, when you have Attlee talking in Parliament, in the corridors, and explaining his predicament, Prime Minister Attlee, you know, he talks about all of his reasons for why he cannot let that couple set foot on Africa and sleep in the same bed together. So even when they're not in the scene, it's very important that it comes through the prism of this couple's love. And that's what I tried to hold on to throughout, you know, as I say, the rest of development, the rest of, you know, shooting the film, and then right the way up until the last cut, which was, you know, very recently done, was to try and ensure that whatever we saw, it came through the prism of the couple's love, but had to be against a very strong backdrop of politics. Susan Williams's book was so dense that I could only read about 18 pages a day because there was so much to absorb and take in. But I think it was very interesting in terms of the way that it balanced the love story and the politics and all of the information that it gave us. And that helped Guy with the script. That then helped me later on in terms of making the film. So it was very important to try and sort of stay true to that in some way, but stay true to my belief that if you are telling a story about love, it shouldn't just be about romantic love. This is also about paternal love. It's about a man's love for his country and his people, and the woman that he has fallen in love with his country. So that the love is layered, and there are different types of love, but ensuring that everything comes through the prism of one of those types of love.
Well, thank you very much for your questions. I'm going to ask you now, please, just to stay in your seats while we leave the platform. But would you please, while you're doing that, thank Laura, Tom, David, Amma, Rosamund, Jack and Jessica. Thank you.